Hello, and welcome to Enterprise UX, Project Success with User Experience Design. Very excited that you're here to join me on this presentation today. Enterprise User Experience Design is something that I'm very passionate about and have been really concentrating my career towards because it's still something that's really new. A lot of times we see user experience or UX as it applies to consumer-facing products. It's definitely a channel that's been very popular and with user experience design is starting to become it's starting to pop into people's minds. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to it today. I just want to give you a little bit of history on Imaginet to sort of give you a feeling for why we're able to talk on the topic. We're a world-class solutions provider for world-class organizations with over 650 Microsoft ALM customers and 1,800 plus engagements. We've got over 500 Microsoft development customers, and we're a privately held Canadian company since 1997 with offices across the world. And we've got over 650 development projects, predominantly with Fortune 200 companies. So we've worked with a lot of big players. My name is Bob Duncan. I've got 10 years plus experience as a user experience designer for primarily large scale websites, so really enterprise or large consumer facing web applications. I've dealt a lot with both web and mobile applications. My experience is in a various different industries. I've dealt with communications, news, media, insurance, and retail. So the target audience for this presentation is really anybody that works in a software team. So if you're a designer, if you're a developer, a project manager, a team lead, or on the executive side and you have to get budgeting, it's really going to be targeting you very well. And we're primarily targeting enterprise applications, but the concepts and information that we're going to cover here, it applies to small projects as well. Now, the concepts that we're going to be talking about apply to desktop applications, responsive applications, mobile applications, and really when you look at UX, it's so targeted towards people, not necessarily technology. So the concepts, they apply really well even to service design. So what is user experience design? A lot of people get confused when they hear UX, well, user experience, and it's not uncommon for a lot of people to bring a graphic designer in at the end of the project and say, okay, you're a UX person. And user experience is so much more than just understanding the graphics and making it look pretty at the end of the project. It's really about understanding user needs. It's understanding the fundamental behaviors behind your users and the goals that they're trying to achieve. And that's where user research comes in. It's also about information architecture, where you're organizing and labeling content to align with your users' sort of preconceived expectations on how they're going to find your content. And then we've got interaction design, where you're really designing for behavior and you're aligning with with really understood and well-researched principles of how people's brains work so that you can design interactions that are usable and align with people's goals. And then you bring in the graphic design and it's really obviously it's an important aspect because designing something that looks right and feels right, it gives your application a sense of trust and quality. It's what's really it's made Apple such a popular brand because they've obviously got it right and people want to use their application and that's more important than ever with enterprise applications because a user adoption is something that a lot of people are really struggling with. So we're going to take a journey today. Really what we're going to do is we're going to look at the current state for UX in the enterprise environment. And then we're going to look at some areas of where we could be, and I think that there is a lot of potential, a lot of real business value to really adopting UX and seeing where we can be. And then we're going to take a look at what we need to do to get there. So let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of enterprise UX. Well, one good thing about UX is it's still in its infancy. There was a research done by Deloitte Consulting, and they had found that there was a specific project where they had a 300% increase in worker productivity and 55% reduction in training time and 21% improvement in the company's upsell and cross-sell activities. So, there are some really bad applications out there. So, in really in a lot of ways, the bar is low. So we do have a lot of opportunity to really turn some heads and show how good we can make software. I look at mobile as being a really good thing for UX. It's really good because people are realizing, hey, we don't have room for error. Not only is there very little physical space and there's low bandwidth and latency, um, mobile has added that extra cost to development teams. You're having to build often one application that works across different platforms. So it's more important than ever that you need to get it right, and it's expensive. So I mean, it's if you're going to be building a user experience and it needs to work on mobile and desktop and it really needs to be right the first time. It's easier than ever than ever to sell. There was a research done by Sandhill.com and NeoChange that found that the most important factor in realizing value, 70%, was to effective user adoption. And I think we all know that a lot of people have struggled with, especially in the enterprise world, getting users to use your application. It's obviously very important. It's not going to be aligning with people's goals or doing what they need if they don't adopt it. Not to mention it's frustrating. And people are really starting to take action in the UX world. UX employment is really skyrocketing, especially in the US, and it's really grown in Canada as well. And obviously in the UK, it's become a really big thing. It's failing UX is proving to have catastrophic consequences, having to build an application multiple times because people won't use it or training is too high. So, and hey, you're here, right? So that shows that people are definitely willing to take action. So let's look at the bad of UX. Low productivity. A lot of people are finding that they're spending too much time trying to find content or fulfill a function. And not only that, when you do UX properly and you fundamentally understand your users' needs and their behaviors and really what you need to do to deliver success for them, you might actually find that you're building the wrong thing and you can concentrate your efforts less on the wrong thing and more on the right thing. It's very tiring to use an application that is designed poorly. If you can design something that's usable, intuitive, it reduces cognitive load and less stress, and your employees will be more efficient because they won't be tired. And another way to look at this is really growth. I mean, the fact that productivity is low means we can turn that around and really improve productivity. So that's something that I'm really excited about. Training is slow and painful. I've had this debate with people in the past, and I really wonder how much training is really required. People are really getting used to using sophisticated technology. I mean, Facebook, LinkedIn, there's all sorts of tools that people are using at home that it's really sophisticated, but training isn't required because it's just designed to be intuitive. Again, fundamentally understanding your users' needs, understanding, how would they naturally expect to use something should really reduce, if not eliminate, training. And at the very least, like I said, it's something that you can definitely reduce. And wasted effort on documentation. I'm not a big fan of documentation to begin with. I often see people creating documentation for the sake of creating documentation. And if your users don't need it, if they're certainly not going to read it, what's the point in creating it and maintaining it? So, I mean, now again, I'm not certain that everyone can remove documentation completely, but if you build an intuitive and usable application, you really have to question the required effort, at least for all of it. And poor morale. I've seen a number of teams go through building. I mean, when you look at developers and designers, they really wanna build something that that provides value. I mean, that's the number one thing that people want from their job, right? Is they want to make a difference. They want to feel like they're contributing. And if you have to design an application or rebuild an application because it failed to get user adoption or it just didn't work properly, it's definitely going to reduce the morale of your team. So that's kind of a problem. And the ugly, and really when it comes to enterprise software, it's literal. Enterprise uh, software, it tends to be pretty ugly. A lot of a lot going on, very little focus on the main things that the user needs. It's actually one thing that I notice is people often don't even realize how much screen real estate is being used by something that isn't even required. So it gets pretty hairy pretty quickly. Here's another sort of screenshot that I showed, and this is not uncommon. I've seen a lot of web applications that this old forms and old tables. Sometimes there's some style to it, but really a lot of information that's ugly and not very easy to use. And then there was a big campaign that didn't do so well with Avon integrating integration with SAP. It was in Forbes. I've got the link at the bottom there, but they invested $125 million in their latest software that their Avon reps were using out in the field, and it failed to receive user adoption. And I think the reason it really hit the news so hard was because Avon representatives apparently left the company in meaningful numbers. So they actually lost reps because they were just too frustrated with using their application. And really the interesting thing is, and that's sort of a good segue into the fact that users are now expecting good user experiences. When you look at the devices that people are using at home and the software, it's so good compared to how it used to be. And the funny thing is, it used to be the reverse. Enterprise software used to be the fancy stuff, right? This was like people didn't have such a good experience at home back in the Windows 95, Windows 98 days, but their enterprise stuff was much more sophisticated, and it's done that big flip where consumers are using such great stuff at home. And like I said, user experience is so huge in the consumer facing world that applications, web applications, the types of applications that people use to manage their photos and their photo books and printing and service related design, it's so good. So people are beginning to expect it. And I believe executives are beginning to expect it. I mean, the average user is using good applications at home, so is the executive. So, and it's interesting. I've actually, in my research, I found that some people are even referring to the consumer user experience world as consumer grade. So they want their UX in the enterprise to be consumer grade. And remember, if they don't get it from you, really depending on the type of application they have, and this has definitely been a big problem in the IT world, especially when it comes to security and getting everyone using the same applications. But if they don't get it from you, they're going to try to find it somewhere else. Now, not all applications will work that way, right? So if they can't find it somewhere else, they're going to muddle through it, but it's going to be slow. They're going to be frustrated, and it's going to be an expense to the organization. And so when you really look at it from yourself, right? Well, what's in it for you? We get to deliver the right product the first time. Not just a product the first time, but the right product. You're going to have an improved quality, improved efficiency, and less waste. Again, we don't want to be building the wrong thing. We want to be building the right thing. And happiness. Everyone everyone wants to be happy. It's a much more stress-free environment when along with building business requirements, you've done your user research and you understand, okay, I know what the business wants, I know what the users want, let's marry it together. It's going to give you a whole lot more confidence as you're going throughout your development project, and you know that you're building the right thing. So hey, UX to the rescue. As we're going to learn through building empathy for your users and understanding their needs, we can deliver software that people want to adopt, not just change that upsets people because they don't want to adopt it and they already know the application, but something that people are going to be looking forward to using and something that's going to really help them to get their jobs done. It's proven to be effective in consumer-facing products, and I think that we can make it work in enterprise as well. So, sort of a line that I've used a lot in my career as a user experience designer is is marry business with users. So the goal here is to take the business needs, and I think that those processes are like that's something that we've been doing for a long time, and we understand. Our business analysts really understand, and then marrying it with the user needs. And really, the goal here is not to just rely on your BA to do your user assessment. That's where you need a user experience person. And the user experience person should be working with your business analysts and systems analysts to marry the needs of the different stakeholders and to be building a solution that works for everybody. So how can we get there? Back to what I would sort of mentioned earlier. We've got user research, information architecture, interaction design, and graphic design. All right, so user research. I sort of pulled out a quote here from Jacob Nielsen. For those of you that aren't really familiar with Jacob Nielsen, he's been sort of hailed as the guru of web page usability by the New York Times. He's really the leader and pioneer of user interface design and user experience design for a number of years. I like his quote, to design an easy to use interface, pay attention to what users do, not what they say. And that's really important. There's a lot of people that think, I guess really coming from the marketing and research world where a lot of people like to think that focus groups, if you pull enough people into a focus group, but Jacob Nielsen has kind of got some really good proof that, focus groups aren't really where it's at. You really want to focus on what people do, not what they say they do. So user research, something that you kind of want to ask yourself is, well, how does a project get started today? And how do you determine what to build? Do you talk to your users? Do the people using your software have a say in what's built? I know a lot of times, especially in large companies, the process to get to what is going to be built is determined by the time you actually get to start building it. So it's actually really important that earlier you can bring user research in, even if you have a sort of a phase of the project that happens before you determine the scope of the project. It's really important to fundamentally understand, okay, what do our users need, along with what the business needs. And that's a big change, and that's something that, it really takes a bit of a mind shift, but it will pay off huge. UX is about people. It's not technology, and that's one of the biggest things that you'll find. If you start to do some research in the UX world, is understanding that UX is about people and not technology, and it's really about people's goals. When you look at user-centered design, it's just sort of another kind of buzzword when it comes to UX, but it's really fundamentally understanding, okay, what is this person here for? Why are they using this application? Why are they at this job? And when you fundamentally understand, okay, why is this person using an application, you can help really empathize with them, and empathy is a significant part of understanding how you can build something that aligns with their needs and with their goals. So, and I really want to kind of highlight the fact that if you talk to your users, they will fight for you. A lot of people are having difficulty getting their users on board to use their application, but it's really key that if you talk to your users, they will fight for you. Bring them in really early. Make them feel like they have a stake in the game, because they do, right? At the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to be using the applications. Delivering a project that has X number of features isn't success. It's not success until your users are on board and they start using it. And I think that if you bring them in early, really allow them to have sort of skin in the game, and you'll find that it's huge, and it's really fundamental to understanding what they want. So another methodology that is really common in the user experience world and really research world in general is ethnographic research. And this is kind of image really depicts it really well. And it's observing people in their natural habitat. So if you're going to be building an application for users to manage, at a contact center, for example, it's really important that your designers, the people who are going to be working, and developers, they see your users in their natural habitat. They witness the chaos, the multiple monitors that they have to swivel through. Really whatever the situation is, it's fundamental that you understand. If you're going to be talking about, well, how long should it take for this page to load? What's acceptable? And if you understand that, holy, these people are busy and they're answering calls and they're doing this, that, and the other thing, it's really fundamental to understand the context, because then you can make decisions based on really understanding how it's going to be used, as opposed to your own preconceived notions. And that's something to really keep in mind when you're looking at design. It's understanding your users, not how you expect your users. It's really common for people to say, well, if it was me, I would want it to do this, but it's not really fair because it's not based behind any sort of science. But when you do ethnographic research, you really get to build empathy and understanding for what your users really go through when they're using your application. A mental model is another method that we use to build an understanding of how your users would expect something to work. So there's really three different types of models. There's a conceptual model, so that's sort of the end design. The conceptual model is you're designing it to align with a certain model. Implementation model is how it's built. And really what happens is a lot of people tend to implement something based on, again, their own preconceived notions. So what you want to do is you want to build a mental model. A mental model is, okay, this is your user's expectation as to how something should work, and you want to align the implementation model, how you implement it, with the mental model. So that's going to be how you organize the content, how the interaction design flows, what shows up on the screen, when and where. So what we do is we use this sort of visual process that shows, at the top it shows thoughts and feelings, and at the bottom it shows how features look and how our problems are going to, how our tools are going to solve their problems. So the mental model chart sort of diagram gives you a real good feeling as to what their problems are and how we can fix it, and then how they expect or what they really need. So really the next method that I use, and it's very important, it's used very heavily, is usability testing. Often, I've actually seen a lot of people who aren't really big in the UX space still do usability testing, and that's their only research. It's not really a great way to look at it, because usability testing isn't going to tell you what you should build, but what it's going to do, and it's really good at, is telling you if you built something properly. It won't even tell you if you built the right thing, but it's definitely going to say, yep, that design is working, it's usable. And really the goal is to put your applications in front of real users. And the great thing about usability testing is you can do it early and you can do it often. A lot of people find that if you're going to be doing usability testing, that you kind of do it until you get it right, and you can do it on prototypes, which is great, so you don't even have to wait until you've started coding. It's very inexpensive to fix a design when compared to fixing code, right? So if you do usability testing before it even hits the engineers, then you can diagnose and fix the problems really early on. And the great thing about usability testing is it's actually fairly inexpensive. There's a sort of I got a link at the bottom, but it's Jacob Nielsen again saying why you only need to test with 5 users. And what they found is that anything over 5 users, you're going to start to see the same problems over and over again. If you do 3 to 5 users on a usability test, you're going to highlight the fundamental problems with the design, and then everything else is just gravy. So you're actually better off, if you want to do 9, 12 tests, you're better off doing 3 to 5 a few times. So you do a test in the morning, you make a fix in the afternoon, you do another test in the afternoon, fix them the next morning, and you'll find that after really a couple of days of fixing and iterating on your prototypes, that you've actually uncovered the major problems with usability. So it's actually really, and it's really inexpensive, and really one of the great things that I like about usability testing is, especially in the enterprise world, it's really a whole lot more difficult to get users in the consumer facing world, because you got to pay them, you got to get them in. But enterprise, you often have users. You have people in the call center, you have people in a support group, you have employees at administration. If you can get someone away from their desk for 15 minutes, 20 minutes to do a quick usability testing on a function, it's very effective. And often you can actually do usability testing on paper prototypes. You don't even have to prototype them on the computer. If it's actually best if you can start with paper prototypes. If you're designing wireframes on paper, and you can actually put them in front of users, and it's a very, very effective and very efficient and inexpensive way to get real user feedback early on in the project. So now we're going to look at information architecture. And information architecture is it's the art and science of organizing and labeling websites, intranets, online communities. It's all about organizing your content to align with how your users expect it to show up. Now, again, I'd like you to sort of ask yourself, how are you doing this today? How is content being organized? Are you organizing content based on someone's individual expectations, or are you getting your users involved, right? How do you determine what the labels are going to be? And that's key, right? When someone comes to a website or an application and they're looking for content to find what they're looking for, the labels have to line up with what they expect, right? Not with what you expect. How do you handle search? And search is huge, right? I've always pushed for search is very important, but it's second to organizing and labeling your content. And then, because really most people at the end of the day, it's easier for people to recognize something than it is to recall. So it's easier to recognize a label on your application and say, yep, that's what I want, as opposed to stopping and think, okay, what do I want? And then finding a search and then lining it up. Now, not to say that search isn't important, because it absolutely is, but I always like to look at it as being secondary to properly organizing and labeling your content. And search will actually often fall in line when you organize and label your content properly. And really, you want to think about, do users have confidence when they use your application or website? Do they know that they're gonna be able to find what they're looking for? Um, and a lot of people would answer no, but I mean that's something that we can fix, and it's something that we can improve. So I'm just wondering if this is familiar for a lot of people. It sort of speaks to what I was just mentioning. You've got your users on one side and your content on the other, and it's a maze to get there. And I mean, it's not uncommon for people to have hundreds, thousands of pages. So it's definitely a real problem. It's something that can be solved through good, proper information architecture processes. Usually one of the things that you'll see early on in an information architecture a project is well, in website governance, a content audit. So what you do is you actually assess all of the pages on your site, and you associate metadata, whether or not it's out of date, the type of page, the last time it was updated. And actually, I really, really like associating a content audit with analytics. So real world analytics. When was the last time this page was viewed? If it hasn't been viewed for 6 months, take it down, right? I know a lot of people are afraid to take content down, but a content audit is going to be really good at showing you the whether or not your content is out of date, and whether or not people are using it. Even maybe analytics are low because people can't find it and it's an important piece of content. So a content audit can be a very slow process, and it's a really important process to do by hand. I know I've seen a lot of people try to do content audits using tools, but nothing gets you sort of intimately aware of the content like crawling through the website or web application, really documenting it, understanding it, and then you can start to feed progress. And generally speaking, once you have a content audit complete, you're going to do a card sort. So there's two different types of card sorts. And actually maybe I'll explain what a card sort is first. So what you do is, if you're going to be organizing a specific section of a website, what you do is you get cards with labels on them, you put them in front of your users, and you have them organize the content, and in some cases label the content. So this goes back to a user lands on your website. They're trying to figure out, okay, how do I find this page, right? So instead of you determining the label or figuring out how it's going to be organized and what sections are going to be created, you put it in front of your users. So an open card sort is when category names are not determined. The participants essentially determine the categories and move the cards around. A closed card sort is when category names are determined and participants assign cards. And actually, is sort of a byproduct of a card sort. Again, sort of goes back to getting your users involved. if you get, you want to run a card sort on a specific section of content, and you get a few people from a specific department, it gives them a break from their job, yes, but it also gives them the opportunity to feel like they're fundamentally making an impact. Now, this is sort of the manual card sorting process, and what you want to do when you're done organizing the content, if after you've done a few people, is you actually document how people organized it, and then you can start to see peaks and trends in how your users organized your content. And there are online tools as well. I've used a number in the past. Optimal Sort is one, but you can essentially send a link to someone where you've entered in all of the content and they organize it on their computer on a website. And then once everyone's done it, it usually doesn't take long, like 10, 15 minutes at the most. You don't want to give them too much because then it's going to become overwhelming. But you get reports on the trends and the differences, and you can start to see how do people sort of expect this content to be organized, and how do they expect it to be labeled, and often even what content is not needed. If you're using people that actually use the content, you're going to have some real experts sort of come out of the woodworks, and they're going to say, you know what, we really don't use this, it's useless, get rid of it, and then you don't have to worry about maintaining it any longer. So it's a really beneficial process, and I found to be very effective. um, Typically, once you've sort of done the card sorting process, it's going to feed your sitemap slash sort of flowchart. So it's going to, in a sitemap gives you kind of an overall view of how is this application organized. It can become pretty big, especially with flowcharts, when you indicate, the different processes, if there's authentication, if there's error messages. But it's really nice before you jump into the actual designing stage of the project to have a bird's eye view as to how the web application or mobile application or whatever you're building, to have a bird's eye view as to how it's structured. So once you've got your sitemap finished, that typically feeds into the wireframe process. And I've just shown a couple of examples here. And I'm sure most people to a certain extent are familiar with wireframes. And wireframes, I often start on paper. And really what you're doing is you know the content now, you know what your users want, and you're going to start to wireframe just the high level, what's going to be here on the page. So you do it by paper, and then as you start to, obtain approval and you start to become more confident with it, you move on to the screen, and then you do it digitally. So I consider wireframes to be part of information architecture, but I also consider it to be part of the next section, which is the interaction design. So, now again, a lot of people get confused by interaction design, and we look at information architecture. We know it's designed for information. Graphic design is designed for emotion. Interaction design is designed for behavior. So again, I really want you to kind of stop and think about who works through the interaction process of your design. Who considers the behaviors of your users? Are you building the right thing? I mean, that's something that I'm going to ask a lot. Are you building the right thing? And interaction design, because it's so driven towards behavior, it's really going to help answer that question. And will people use this thing? And obviously that's why we're here, right? We're building these applications so people will use them, and it'll help them get their job done. So if they're not going to use it, we've got a problem, right? So Alan Cooper is really a pioneer in interaction design and user experience base. And I really like this quote: if we want users to like our software, we should design it to behave like a person, respectful, generous, and helpful. And it's a really interesting way of looking at it. And he's actually, from one of his books, he's got the evolution of the software development process. So you look at the olden days, before my time, programmers were tasked with building and testing, and then they would ship it. Somewhere along the line, they brought in managers who would initiate the project, work with the business, initiate the project, pass it down to the programmer who would build and test. Then they realized, wait a minute, we need QA. So again, the manager would initiate the project, programmers would build it, QA, and then look, we even have a designer at the end to do the look and feel. And I'd like to ask you to, ask yourself, if you do have a designer, is that where you're bringing them in? If so, that's a problem, right? You don't want them coming in at the end because they're just lipstick on a pig, right? And then, it goes to ship. And what we're seeing now is we've got managers initiate it, and then you'll see early on we've got users where we're talking to the users. We've got the designers doing the design work and likely working with a BA, but they're speccing it out and they're doing visibility and they work with programmers or systems analysts. And then from the programmers it goes to QA and then you've got input from users and ship. So it's obviously it's a lot more elaborate approach, but you're going to be building the right thing and you're going to be doing a really good job on it. So, and I really want to highlight, there's a really interesting book out there on really on goal-driven design. Again, that's Alan Cooper, the quote that we just saw. And his book's called About Face, and it's really about goal-driven design. It's a really good read if it's if it's something that you're interested in really understanding the importance of it and really help you sell it, and also how to implement goal-driven design in your organization. So a really important aspect of interaction design is persona and scenario analysis. Now, this is really important because we've talked about building the doing the user research early on, right? And if you don't do user research, and you're not talking to your users, but you do personas and scenario analysis, you're really operating on assumptions and guesses, right? So it's really important sort of to kind of go back to that user research part. But for those that aren't familiar, a persona is really it's a identifying the demographics, the psychographics of your users, what types of applications they use. So if you're building a web application for say a 35-year-old mother who's super familiar with Facebook, for example, and you're say you design a mobile application, well, they're going to be familiar with a few of the concepts that are being used in Facebook, right? So it's also a narrative, a narrative describing the user, and then when you pass that into scenario analysis, you're going to be writing out a narrative of how the users are going to be using the application. And it's a real fantastic way of building empathy for your users and understanding the context for how they're going to use the application. And I've actually found as an input to a team is it really helps the users understand, sorry, the project team understand the user, right? You give them a persona that says, this is the sort of a fake name of a person, their age, what they're using the application for, and what types of needs they have, and in giving a narrative of how they're going to fulfill that function, it really drills home what you're building, and that's something that it's I think missed a lot in development projects is that understanding of what we're building and why we're building it. People will get into arguments over what screen shows up where and what button goes here, and can we get away with not doing X. But if you don't really link it back to what you're building, why you're building it, and what fundamental need you're trying to deliver, it's really difficult to have the appropriate conversation. And interaction design. Now, I only talk about it a little bit here because we could do a whole presentation on it. But design principles are really fundamental guidelines for designing usable experiences, and they're really derived from years of cognitive research, understanding how people think, how they see, how their memory works. And it's really critical to building usable applications. And a user experience designer, someone with a really strong interaction design background, is really going to understand the principles. And again, I sort of mentioned one earlier, but a couple samples are recognition over recall, right? It's easier for people to identify something from a list than it is to stop and search. Building for responsiveness. Now, when I say responsiveness in this context, I'm not referring to mobile, building something that scales, but I'm referring to an application that's, it's actually one of the most important principles that you can follow, is that when someone clicks on something, they expect something to happen. Now, you can get away with trickery when it comes to interaction design. If you're clicking on the search button and you've got a bit of load time, well, instead of it just sitting there and then mashing on the search button, you put a loading or getting information, or before the data loads, and you can start to plan out how you can make something feel responsive even though there's a bit of system time in the background that's slowing it down. Designing for intermediate, that's actually something that I always found really fascinating. Is no one wants to be a beginner, but not too many people go so far as to be a sort of advanced user. So what you want to do when someone starts using your application is you want to give them cues and help them out to become an intermediate user really quickly, right away, so they can use your application really intuitively And another one is really preventing errors. Error management is something you have to deal with, and it's really important. You want to help people get around errors, but in your design, you can really design a solution that prevents errors in the first place, so there's less room for problems. It's interesting. You look at the Windows 8 tablet. Was something that I really liked that they did is they actually don't even have a button when you log in. You enter your PIN and you're in. So again, it limits errors, right? There's really nothing you can do wrong there. It's pretty cool. And design patterns. Design patterns. I mean, obviously these concepts apply in the IT and the development world, but we're just kind of reusing them for design. But design patterns are common solutions to common problems, right? We've got a few examples on the right over here that are referring to some mobile patterns, but and I really concentrate on building reusable common patterns and patterns that people are already familiar with. Again, with people being so used to using technology at home, if you're using the same design patterns when they come to work, they don't have to think about it, right? So, a really good example is the sort of three-line menu button that you see on mobile. People use it at home. You see it on Facebook or LinkedIn. It's something that people have been using. Google uses it on the Chrome browser. So if you're using design patterns that people are familiar with, it's going to be quickly intuitive, but also it improves efficiency and consistency by reusing design and code assets on your site. So I'm a real big fan of building really consistent design patterns. And as an output or as a deliverable of a design project, I actually like to deliver a design pattern library. And if you do a search on Google for UX design pattern library, you'll see MailChimp actually has been kind of big in the industry and showing how they reuse and you build information around your pattern libraries so people can sort of understand why to use it, when to use it, and it makes coding and designing a whole lot more efficient. And then we've got design prototypes and I love prototyping everything that I do. Everything from paper prototypes up front so we can usability test them to once we've got the wireframes done and the graphic design, building clickable prototypes that communicate the overall experience of your app. Nothing is more effective and efficient than building something that you can click through. It's not coded yet, but you use tools that allow you to sort of hyperlink your images or together to make it feel like it's a clickable prototype. Such an inexpensive tool for validating design, and it works fantastic with usability testing. I've done usability testing, even remote usability testing on design prototypes, and it gives you a lot of information before you pass a design on to the development team to say, you know what, we got to move that, we got to make this button more prominent. People didn't understand what they needed to do here, and it's really useful. And with the tools that are out there now, there's a program called Axure, Axure, that you can use for wireframing, but it also turns your wireframe into clickable prototypes. But there's also a web app out there that it's just really fast for building mobile and desktop prototypes. It's called InVision, InVision. It's a web application. Just you can turn a few mock-ups into a clickable prototype within a couple of minutes, literally. All right, so the next aspect that we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail is graphic design. So again, I like to ask, is graphic design being considered? When it comes to software, who is doing the graphic design? Do you have someone who understands typography, color theory, understanding how to properly space elements out to give it the appropriate usability? Like honestly, if you have one block of content, is it how does it need to sit to visually look different from another block of content? And it's a real important aspect, and it really builds that sense of credibility that your users are coming to use an application that's good. Right? Like it's that visceral response that you're using something and it's like, yeah, I want to use this. I get it. It works. It's going to work. Right? Obviously, the graphic design is only going to be as good as the application, so you got to have solid coding behind it. But it's really important to build something that has that sort of sense of credibility, right? And it really, when you build something that looks good And even if you didn't design it, but you're on the team, you feel proud of what you worked on. It's something that you want to show someone and say, yeah, I built this. This is great. I was a part of this process. And graphic design, making it look good is a real important part of that process. Giving you that pride and giving your team that pride to say, yeah, we just built something cool and it's awesome and I love it. And I've got a couple of screenshots here that really show a couple of examples of, like these are really nice designs. And these, this is a calendar view, right? This is booking an appointment. And this isn't something that's uncommon for us to do, but it's clean, it's simple. You can see how the elements are spaced out in a way to say, this content belongs, if you look at the columns along the left, how it's spaced out to be a little bit larger, and the contrast in font size. It's real important to making your application maintain that usability, and that this looks like a good solid application, right? I've got a screenshot here of a Litmus app. It's an application for testing email, and they do, this is your dashboard when you log in, and it looks good. It's easy to read, it's easy to flow, the colors are nice. You can see the view engagement report button sort of pop out in the engagement summary. So it's, that graphic design aspect is real. Like I said, it's real important to really finishing off and giving that nice polish to your application. And I've got another screenshot, that shows the dashboard, right? Like, it's that attention to detail that's just really, really something to aspire to. So, and I really just kind of want to close it off by saying you too can create usable software that people want to use. And hey, we're here to help. Like I said, I've got over 10 years experience in building successful enterprise applications. And like I said, enterprise is it's what we do. We have a lot of experience with big clients, and we can work on really any type of design project that you need. We've got experience in desktop web applications, responsive web applications, mobile applications, and one of the things that I didn't really touch on, but I want to sort of highlight the importance of is your design team needs to understand front end concepts, and that's something that we've got a lot of experience in the design, and then understanding how that relates back to the HTML and CSS. And where possible, I actually like the designer to be a part of that process and actually creating HTML and CSS and working with the developers. And that's something that we've got a lot of experience in and believe quite a bit in. So, I really just want to thank you so much for your time. It's been really, it's really, really great putting this presentation together. And, if you ever have any questions, my goal really is to help you deliver software that is great. Now, that's first and foremost. So feel free to reach out and contact me, and I really look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much, and have a great day.